started with the recording. And with that too, I'm going to turn things over to Carol, who will be serving as our host, and she will take care of the introduction. So take it away, Carol.
All right, thank you, Melissa. So I'm Carol. Let me introduce myself to Jill, who I've known forever. So I'm a CS teacher at Ann Richards School for Young Women Leaders. And so I'm a second career CS teacher, sort of. My first degree was in education with a computer science minor. But I graduated, Jill, this is before I knew you, in '89. I think that's right. And after I graduated, I learned there were no CS classes actually in high school because there were no CS certified teachers yet. I was the only one in Texas and there were no classes. So I ended up teaching at a junior college, which was great, for 4 years. Then I went back and got my computer science degree and I worked in tech for 20 years. But I always taught. I always taught adjunct at Austin Community College, or I volunteered teaching writing to kids. At one point, I taught as part of my job. I taught programming classes. And so I always came back to teaching. And so 5 years ago, I left tech and got a master's in education and then started teaching. And I really love it. I think it's awesome. And I thought it was the safest career ever choice, but apparently it's not. So, but it's all good. And so let me introduce Deborah Karaoke. So she's Deborah, Deborah, I've known, she was in Texas for a while. And so I worked with Deborah at We Teach. And she was a software engineer for 16 years and worked in cybersecurity for a while. She's also taught high school a number of times. But Deborah, do you want to say anything else about yourself?
Oh, when I was in Texas, we were working for the We Teach.
Right.
Where we did PD for teachers for several years. We did that. So we worked with teachers for a while and all in the areas of computer science. And yeah, so that's it. That's how I got to know you, was from We Teach. Yeah.
So Reiner Mueller is a CS teacher at LASA, which I do have to, Reiner, I should have brought this up earlier. So they just came out with the top schools in Texas. Was it Texas or Austin? I think it's the world, but LASA was number one, and Ann Richards was number two. And I just, my feelings are a little bit hurt, Reiner, that I feel like, I don't know if that was fair, how they decided that, but anyway, congratulations to LASA. And but you were, Reiner was a chip designer for 22 years. And so had just done a lot in the tech world before he went to LASA and got into teaching. And Reiner, is there anything you want to add?
Oh yeah, just like same as you, I really wasn't aware. My daughter was in high school at the time when I kind of made the decision I wanted to teach, and I was really not aware that computer science was the thing in high school. There were no classes in her high school. So I actually got certified in math when I did the alternative certification program. And it was LASA that kind of found me. They were just scanning resumes and they came across mine and called me in to interview, and it worked out great. I love it. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Right. And Anita Johnson is a CS teacher at Keeling Middle School. She worked at Intel for a long time and has been a fan of coding forever. And so, Anita, do you have something that you want to add?
Muted.
My kids. You're muted, Miss Jackson. No, I never worked as a software engineer. It's kind of funny that, you know, I ended up, or as a teacher, but I always coded for fun, which sounds crazy, but I did. And so, yeah, so, but this is the best job ever. Definitely.
That's awesome. I love that you code for fun. That is a good characteristic of a CS teacher.
Either that or just insanity.
Yeah, that helps too. A little bit of that. All right. So we had some quick polls that Jill. So we probably can do this informally. So you said You work in tech still now, and do you want to say anything else about like where you are now or what you're thinking about doing?
Well, let's see, this is Jill. And so for the last 15 years, I've been a software architect specializing in the electronic medical record. And yeah, I mean, you know, I've always thought about teaching, and it hit me this morning. I was thinking about it, and you know, I definitely have to go and get a certification, I would think. So I'm just starting to look at it today, actually. It's only been about 24 hours that I've known that we're, you know, going to have all of our staff laid off. So in August 8th is the separation date. So, you know, I just hope in the next 90 days to, you know, get a plan and see what all I need to do to get there.
So if there is ever a sign from the universe that you should be a teacher, I think this is it.
You know, and that's what I said to my wife, Sarah, so because we have 19-month-old triplets. And so I asked her, do you mind watching them while I go jump on the Zoom call? And when I told her why, she said, absolutely, that sounds like it's meant to be. So,
Yeah,
so
that's
here I am, Carol.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
That sounds like a little bit of work. That is divine timing. You'll have a story to tell. For sure. All right, so so we're just gonna give like some background in like what we're thinking when we say second career CS teacher. What we think about when we say it is the person who worked in technology first, like for at least about 5 years, and now they're teaching computer science in K-12. And why are we talking about it? Like, why is it a big deal? Well, there's a whole kind of theme with technology jobs are growing, and there are more and more technology jobs every day, and there aren't enough people to fill all these technology jobs, and the jobs are high paying jobs or high demand jobs. And so there's a lot of opportunity for students in technology. But now at this point, only half of US schools teach at least one CS course. So the majority of US schools don't have a single computer science course. And I think that every time I say that out loud, I think I must have heard it wrong. And maybe I just need to double check it one more time, because of just every job requires computer science to some degree. And it's just crazy that we have half of our schools without a single course. And it's shocking. And then related to that is the fact that it's proportionally impacts underserved students more. So students from underserved groups and are more likely to be in a school that has no computer science. So when we talk about equity and education in general, this is an area where it's especially inequitable access to computer science in K-12. And then, so we have this huge opportunity, and but under pre-service teacher preparation programs, which is where we get all of our other teachers. And I forget what year this is. I would have to go, it's from a few years ago, but nationwide pre-service programs graduated 12,000 math teachers, 11,000 science teachers, and 75 computer science teachers. It's really shocking how the pre-service programs aren't able to do this. And if we had another seminar, I could go all into like how, like all the reasons why, but it's crazy. There just aren't any new teachers. There are very few new teachers that come out of their pre-service program with a computer science certification. And so there's two paths that people have taken to try to fill in this gap. One is to find in-service teachers that are teaching something else and get them up to speed to pass a certification test and add a computer science to their courses. And this is Deborah, that's what we did at UTeach, was we looked to find in-service teachers who had an interest, and then we would do courses and test prep to try to get them to pass that certification course. So that's one where we've been able to fill in some of this gap. We teach as, I think there's like 400. Deborah, does that sound right? They've gotten 400.
Right now, I believe they're about 575 by now.
Yeah, 575 new CS teachers from We Teach. And this is not to talk bad about anybody, but the pre-service University of Texas graduates 1 or 2 a year. So 575 versus 1 or 2 is a kind of remarkable comparison. And then the other path that's helping to fill some of this gap are second career teachers, people in the tech industry who learn how to teach and make a career change. And there's this group of teachers in computer science having a special opportunity to make an impact and make a difference, because there is such a great need for CS teachers in high school. So we did a survey of CS teachers, second career CS teachers, and we did a qualitative survey because we wanted to kind of keep it open-ended and see what people had to say, as opposed to giving a pick list of things to choose from, since we're kind of early in our stage of learning more about this group of people. And so it was open in March. We got 26 responses. And in general, like some averages, the average years in tech was 17. So that was pretty impressive. Some people had 30 years of experience in tech, and it came from a lot of different roles. So some people were technicians or programmers, tech marketing, project management. There was a VP of a Fortune 500 company. So really a lot of different roles in and around tech. It wasn't just your typical engineer. So a lot of a variety there. And then the average years teaching CS was 7. All right, so what challenges did second career teachers face more often than the traditionally trained CS teachers? And by traditionally trained, I mean your typical undergrad pre-service program, the undergrad pre-service program. And the number one was probably no surprise, but classroom management was their biggest challenge. Having enough information or knowledge or skill about pedagogy, building curriculum and lesson plans, school protocols and politics was a big one, and then student motivation and attention span. So that's kind of a general high level feedback that we got from the survey. But what I want to do now is ask our panel if you could share a story or an example about challenges that you faced that were, you feel like, kind of unique because you were a second career teacher. And let's see, Anita, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think that not having been a teacher, I wasn't really aware that a lot of things, the class, I mean, I think this looks like my list. So in addition to this list, just things like, you know, it was an elective course, and I thought that meant that students wanted to be in the class, that they had elected it. And that was a huge challenge for me to find out that there were students in the class who did not want to be there. And I thought it was a mistake at first. Talk to a counselor, and the counselor just looks at me like I'm crazy and says, well, where else are they going to go? We have to put them somewhere. And I thought, okay, so deep breath. And that was a lot of my first year, was figuring that out. So I'll share that one.
All right.
Maybe that's number 5. But.
Yeah, part of that. So Reiner, what about you?
My main thing was just how it's, I guess you compare drinking from a fire hose. When you get in there, you know, you have your material ready, and one class later you're through that and you got to be ready for something else completely the next day. So in my case, I started in my first year, there was 2 classes I was teaching that were brand new. So I was creating the material. I was just not using somebody else's curriculum. So it was a struggle. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. I like being busy, so it was fun.
Yeah, awesome. And Deborah, what was the challenge for you?
I can say that the very first one, that class management, you know, getting into a classroom and seeing that students don't want to behave, they're rude and they want to talk back and they just don't want to listen. I mean, that was a shocker. I remember my very first or second day in a classroom, a student threw a desk at me, but
Oh.
it just happened to be that the student had other issues that were not shared with me, and he was not well prepared to have a new teacher. So somebody failed both of us, because he had other medical challenges that he should have been told and prepared that you're going to see a different face than the one you had before, So he just could not settle in the home. So that to me was very, very shocking, so the class management was quite a challenge, like Anita said, because you were told there were electives. But and then the curriculum, I started teaching 2010. Those were those times when there were not all these CS for all and all their materials and curriculums and everybody coming out of the woods to get the CS money and prepare all sorts of curriculum. Those were not there then. And then there was a lot of politics between CTE and computer science, and you were there, you didn't belong to the core classes, you did not belong to CTE, you had no funds, you're just there, and you didn't even know during PLC or during meetings where you were supposed to go or where you belonged. And even if you chose one or chose even math, and they're talking about all these benchmarks and all this stuff that did not apply to you, and nobody cared or seemed to think that you as the only CS teacher could get any support on anything. So that was interesting. And then we already talked about 5, the motivation. I mean, once the students got to know you and you started making the material fun and all that, then we had a lot of fun. So the motivation started being good. I developed the program. The program became really huge. We needed more teachers. So that was my experience.
Yes, I know what you mean about being the only CS teacher and not knowing what meeting to go to. And I found myself in that position a lot. And sometimes I would be in math, and sometimes I would be in CTE, and sometimes I would be, I don't even know where the other third place I was, but sometimes I did find I would get out of department meetings because I didn't really have a department. And so sometimes it was great. But it is very odd in schools. CS is not its own discipline, and it's not in the core curriculum, but it doesn't fit with anything else. And so it's very odd. All right. So what about advantages? But we asked in our survey, what advantages do second career CS teachers have over the traditionally trained teachers? And the number one that came up a lot was the ability to share real world experience and examples, and to make CS more relatable and engaging. There was a lot about sharing information about what kinds of majors there are in college, or what kind of jobs there are for a career. They talked about deeper understanding of CS content, and then also great debugging skills. And so what advantages have y'all found in your experience? And we can just go do the same order, I suppose. Anita, what about you?
Yeah, for my students, they really like the stories, and I was fortunate in my career to have a lot of interesting encounters. So, a nice chat with Steve Jobs, or Steve Ballmer at Microsoft, or Bill Gates, or, I when I was at Intel, we encountered these people. And so they're almost too old for the kids to know who they are now.
Oh no.
5 years ago, they knew who Steve Jobs was. So that's, that's a level of cool that can occasionally be impressive and get their attention, and then they ask questions, and that's something that a traditionally trained teacher wouldn't be able to do.
Right. Yeah. So Ryder, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely relate a lot of experiences and stories from my work career as well. And when I used to interview people and questions I used to ask, I asked them some of the same questions, even though they're some are pretty advanced. So yeah, they enjoy that. And I think especially at my school, being a magnet school, I think I had to. You have to kind of earn their respect, right? They're pretty hot shot programmers, and you come in as a new teacher, and I think having some credibility from industry helped a lot with that.
Right. And Deborah?
Yes, the stories and your experience as a working woman and all that stuff, and for me being a minority and usually finding myself being the only Black woman, or sometimes the only woman, that was good experiences. But also sharing my travels. When IBM had that contract for the Olympics in China, sharing all that information, all the travels that I did as a software developer, and letting them know as a programmer, you just don't sit behind the desk and program all the time. There are other things that come with it. There's some research that you do, there's some travel that you go. So all the stories were really good, and just helping them with the programs and then letting them know that you really knew what you were talking about. Like Renee said, just and in that respect, that they could trust you, because I joined a school that already had a teacher that they really, really loved, and then you come here and they don't know you that much. So I needed to earn their respect. So that went well. So most of them are sharing the real life experiences and making those relatable and engaging stories, and also talking about college and letting them know that even though we are talking to you about things like searching and sorting and things like that, that you're not going to be writing those at your workplace over and over again, that those things you learn, you know how to use them, but when you go to programming, there's a lot of reference that is done, and you're not writing every program from beginning. So that was good. So sharing that was good with them.
Yes, I had my classes working on cybersecurity this week, and I was made myself a little bit vulnerable, I'll admit, but I told them the time when I had clicked on something I was not supposed to click on, and IT came to my office and took my laptop away. And how embarrassing it was. And because I am a CS person, that I clicked on something and then I didn't have my laptop all day, and then they had to give me a loaner, and so they laughed, and I said, you don't want Gary to come to your office in front of all your friends and take your laptop. And they're like, no, we don't want that. And I'm like, okay, that's why we're going to talk about what not to click on. And so, yeah, it's fun to be able to give it a context for, like, why do we got to know about these links? They all know who Gary is now.
That's good.
All right, so another question that we ask people: how does a second career teacher balance being experienced and inexperienced at the same time? It is a strange duality to it, that you come in and you might have 20 years of work experience, but you are a first year teacher. And the number one response to this was that it required a lot of humility and willingness to learn around the teaching concept, around the teaching ideas, because as a first year teacher, you're not an expert teacher. And so what do y'all have to share? Like, Anita, what was it like for you to have all of this experience and to come in with all of this like wisdom and knowledge from the world, but to be a first year teacher who is at like day one in some ways?
Yeah, I think that, I'm sure I answered this, but just this idea of not coming in and thinking you're going to be the expert. And I even would say that's also true even in the content, not just in the teaching part of it, because I think I saw on one of the lists that people said, really good at debugging. But I think that cuts both ways too. If you're really good at debugging and you fix all your students' problems, that kind of cuts back on their learning. So sometimes it was surprising to balance your knowledge of coding, with what the students really needed from you. And so that, willingness to not be the expert. And occasionally, I'm sure Reiner experiences this at his school, the students really do know more than you do. So you can't be afraid of that.
Right. Awesome. Reiner, what about you?
Yeah, for me, I have no problems asking questions, but what for me was interesting is just a whole new lingo, right? Everybody's talking this lingo, all these acronyms that I don't know. And yeah, just kind of getting the bureaucracy. I came from a pretty small company, worked for 20 years, mostly small companies, and things get done pretty quickly there, and just adjusting to the big bureaucracy of the school district and stuff like that. And yeah, I was fortunate because I had a second teacher at my school, a second computer science teacher. I cannot imagine what it would have been like getting thrown into school and you're the only computer science teacher. So AISD matched me with my mentor teacher my first year. He taught Autoshop at a different school. And so I watched him teach. So it was good to see how he taught, but I had no idea how to teach computer science watching him teach. So it was
That's an interesting match.
yeah.
At another school even?
Oh yeah. It was but I did have a teacher local, right? So he was my real mentor, but officially my mentor was at a different school teaching Autoshop. So I did go see him one day.
I wonder how they do that. I had a mentor who hadn't gotten certified yet, and it was also his first year.
Okay.
To look at their matching algorithm. Deborah, what about you?
Yeah, that humility of knowing that you really have to learn, and like Linnea said, they used a lot of acronyms in everything. There were all these things they were using, and I sometimes I was lost. But as far as with the student, knowing when to cut back and know that you have made a lot of assumptions, and that's why students did not perform well, was a really eye-opening, because sometimes you went on a little too fast with some explanation and some things you took for granted. Just knowing that teaching thing, because I did not go to education directly after I left my company. I only did what was it called? Like a training program so I could take the certification. But I really had to go back and take some classes and get all that pedagogy and understanding how to teach. That to me was the best thing that I ever did to become a teacher, because you can know all the material that you know, but if you don't know how to teach properly, that becomes a major headache for you and for the students. So you have to know how to pace all this differentiation. Different students needed different material. And you just go to a class and you're given all these things and you're like, okay, so this student's gonna need this student's gonna need this. So those things had to really humble you and learn and know that it takes so much for a teacher to make a class successful. Teaching was not the number one. First, knowing and understanding your student is number one. So then you know what they need so that you can have a good, equitable classroom. So that was very interesting and humbling for me.
Yeah, that feels very familiar. I remember my first year coming in and I had a high quality curriculum, and then I would do the class and then students weren't learning and I was shocked. I'm like, what do you mean? You're not learning? It's so clear. And there's this curriculum, but it is the part that you just said. There's this whole element of knowing the students and getting to know the students and how you do that and what it looks like. And then there's this whole part about like what happens in that 90 minutes is crafted in so many different ways. And you can't get like how that 90 minutes really works doesn't come from a curriculum. And it's something else. any curriculum that you buy has to be adjusted and changed and modified for whoever is showing up in your class. And so it's quite a learning curve to be a teacher for sure.
Yeah, I would jump in on that. That's very true. What I find is that at the school that I'm at, I've got a lot of English language learners. So I need to spend, before we start any unit, I need to spend a good chunk of time just going over base vocabulary and making sure that the students understand the words that you're going to be using.
Right. Like one thing I learned is that my students weren't reading. Like, and I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know if it was a long passage that they tended to not read the whole thing. But then, so when you learn that, then you have to figure out how you're going to respond. And I wanted to respond both ways. I wanted to give them more reading so that they would improve their skill. But then I also, like for the instructions for an assignment, I would keep those short because I didn't want there to be so much confusion about that. But it's whatever happens in that classroom is nothing that ever comes out of a book, right?
Yeah, and I find that partnering with the more experienced teachers, even like in my case, even though they might be half my age, I came in with 26 years of computing experience, but 0 years of teaching experience. And yeah, the 26-year-old had more teaching experience than I did. And yeah, I would go back to that humility, being humble enough to say, okay, how do I teach vocabulary? You know, what are the techniques? And, you know, everything from the basics of, yep, now I do a word wall and we introduce the vocabulary word and it goes up on the word wall and the students can see it and refer to it all the time. Making sure that we got the anchor charts there so that they've got the terminology as well as the way to use it in front of them at all the time.
Yeah, I think that for a while people started to avoid me because I got in this habit of every time I saw a teacher, I would ask them a question or maybe 5 because I was like a sponge trying to learn as much as I could. So I did never say hi to anybody without asking them at least one question about how do you do this or what is that or what do I do if this happens? And then I had to scale it back a little bit after people started avoiding me in the hall. But I think you have to ask at least 10,000 questions that first year, for sure. All right, so I want to ask the panel, and these are just questions that are asking just about your experience, like what. And the first one is like, what was the moment when you first decided to become a teacher? We should start with Jill for this one because it might have been very recent. So Jill, when was the first moment you thought about becoming a teacher?
Well, I've thought about it for years. However, I've been very happy, as a software architect, and I, very loyal and love my job. And so I've just never really had the opportunity to even consider it other than kind of a daydream. However, my niece is graduating high school this year, and luckily, she has taken many computer science courses. And so it was so much fun helping her with her homework. And I just really enjoyed seeing her love of coding develop. And it really made, that's kind of, why I've been thinking about it for the last, definitely 2 years. And then, with developments at work this week, it just, I really was thinking about it this morning and started Googling, how to get a certification. and then, Carol, I saw your message about on LinkedIn, the announcement. And so for this tonight, and I thought, oh, that's perfect. I want to join and learn.
Awesome. So Anita?
Yeah, I thought about it for about 5 years when I first had the idea, and it was going to be a math teacher because they weren't computer teachers that I knew of. And then it was a very random kind of moment, maybe a little like Jill's, where just all of a sudden one day I met someone who knew someone else who knew someone else, and they said, you should come teach. And I thought, really? I like this question. What were you thinking? I read that, what were you thinking? But what was I thinking? I wasn't thinking anything. It just sort of jumped up and hit me over the head. And I thought, yeah, I could do that. My daughter was a senior in high school, and I thought, it was time for a change. So it was a timing situation for me as much as anything, but it was something that I had pondered for a while. And I was really excited. The thought, the initial euphoria wore off over the months, but I was really excited.
All right, awesome. And Reiner?
Yeah, mine goes way back to the college days. So I probably had the idea going into grad school that I might go through all the way and get a PhD to teach, because I'd done some teaching as an intern during undergrad when I was working at IBM. They had like a site center where student employees could come, and I as an intern got to teach them like Lotus 1, 2, 3 and things like that. So I enjoyed that. End up going to industry after my master's, and then stayed there for 22 years. But I did things like coach soccer and volunteered a couple different middle schools and things like that all throughout. And at some point, I just got to the point of going, man, if I'm going to try this teaching thing, I better get to it. I'm not getting any younger. And so, but it still took about 3 years after that to finally say, okay, let's try it. And I basically just closed my eyes and jumped. I mean, I had no idea what to expect. And I said, well, let's give it a shot, see what happens.
That's awesome. And Deborah?
Yeah, so when I was at IBM, it was not too far from McNeil High School, where IBM was, and the surrounding schools. And they seem to always need, people to speak at the schools and things like that. So I just started off first by being a volunteer. So I would volunteer at different schools and being a speaker. And before I knew it, I was getting more and more into it. And I actually had the school where I ended up teaching. I actually had one of the principals say that I was really good at the teaching thing. And I just jumped, like Linnea said, I just jumped into it. And that first year was rough. Like I said, I had to go back and get some schooling to know how to actually teach. Knowing material and teaching are two very different things. So that's how I jumped, and I started teaching, and then I saw the need. So then there was no need for me to, because you could take some like sabbatical and then go back. So I never really did go back, because once I got into it, and I really liked it. And even though people thought I was having a midlife crisis, I had that from 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 people. But it became something that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to stay. And so I continued, and I got involved in a lot of organizations. So that also made it fun for me to talk with a lot of teachers. And during those organizations, I found myself sharing some stuff here and there. And that is what made me gravitate more now to being a teacher of teachers, educating teachers. Even though I'm not actually in the K-12 classroom, I love working with the teachers, and I still love having to help at schools. So, yeah.
And Clark, tell us about you. When did you first decide to become a teacher?
I had been doing some volunteer work with at-risk youth. So kids that had either dropped out of high school or were about to drop out of high school. And I did find that very fulfilling. However, it was a little frustrating because the kids that you're working with oftentimes ended up in juvenile, or once they turned 18, in adult jail. And I decided that if I enjoyed this, really, I wanted to catch the kids before that happened. And so I also came from IBM. So yay, IBM. And I joined their transition to teaching program. So that got me my teaching license. And then, so it was slow. I mean, you're taking one course at a time, but that's how I got into it. Concerns that I had when I became a teacher were, how am I going to live on a teacher's salary? And that's a tough one,
Yeah.
And what advice would I give a tech professional? Honestly, I would say it's an excellent second career, so get your 401k saved up and then make the jump. I find it very fulfilling, and depending, I see like a lot of the younger teachers that I work with all the time, they really like the lifestyle. They like the fact that they got their summers off, and are definitely enjoying teaching. But yeah, I say, wow, I'm glad I did 26 years first and have the retirement saved up.
Yeah,
Right.
I like that what you said, Clark, about the pay. When I first got my pay, I thought, oh, we just get paid weekly, and then you quickly find out. Because, I just jumped. I didn't do my homework and all that. You just sign these papers and all that. And then you see that check and you're like, ooh, okay. But then you come to balance what you went through working from for 16, 17 hours and teaching at a school, and find that maybe the life is suitable for you. So that's why I stayed, because I
Yep.
like
And
the wow factor with the student, and just seeing them bloom, and I enjoyed what I was doing.
yeah, and it is fulfilling, and you can't beat that. When you have the 4 kids that keep coming back into your room, it's like, well, it's my off hour, can I just hang out here? It's like, yeah. So that's fun, and you
I
can't
want
beat that.
to wrap up with one final question and then leave time if people want to bring up their own questions. So this last one, the advice you would give a tech professional considering becoming a teacher. Anita, can you talk about that one?
Yeah, I would agree with what Clark just said, which is save up, save your money, and do it as a second career is a good thing, but you do need to be prepared financially for the change. And I will just say that at my school, I've been trying to recruit teachers from my school to maybe take my place at some point. I'm nearing retirement age, not this year, but and I've had 2 teachers get all excited about coding. I'm thinking, oh, they'll be good teachers, and then they left for careers in the industry.
Oh no.
So because the pay. So it's not an insignificant step at all. And I would say just be prepared for that. But also, but also if you like seeing the ahas and the wows, like Deborah said, then go for it.
Yeah, awesome. And Reiner?
Yeah, the advice I would give is to try to make connections with other teachers, especially if you're the only teacher at a school. You're pretty isolated on campus otherwise. And I think I like I said, I was fortunate to have a second teacher there, but I feel, yeah, knowing now, having done it 8 years, knowing other teachers in the district and what's going on, and be able to ask questions and share information, that's really helpful. If you're the only one, I don't see how else you can get by without making connections with other teachers around you. Either, yeah, it could be, I guess, virtually, it could be virtually anywhere, but we're fortunate in Austin to have a lot of good conferences. UT used to host a get-together of Texas teachers. They haven't done it for a few years now. UT has the one that they had the IBM place. I've been to that a couple times. So there's a lot of good places to get together and just meet other teachers and share stories and experiences.
Yeah, but I would add one more thing. I know we are running out of time, that people transferring from tech professions into teaching computer science, there's so much more support nationally and so many curriculums out there, and even these CS for All organizations and all that. There are so many now that you're not going to be lonely and you're not going to be alone. You have a lot of support in your state, in your district, in your the country as a general. So it's nothing like when we first started.
That's a good point. So they may not be in your school, but there definitely are in your state and and we have Zoom now. So you can make those connections. So I wanted to give people a chance to ask the panelists any questions that they have themselves. If Jill, if you have a question, or Fan, or Clark, if you have a question for the panelists, let me know, and you can put it in the, that's true. AISD is not super strong in their support of CS. That is true. But you can either unmute and share your question or type it in the chat window.
I would ask a question. People's opinion on AP computer science and the usefulness of that versus teaching other classes.
The usefulness for it used to be, for the longest time, it used to be the only class, computer science course that was offered. Literally, kids didn't have pre-AP. It was it. And then College Board, they came up with, the AP exams, and you know what that means. A lot of students in any high-performing school want to do every AP possible. And if you're in some of the high competitive school, Westwood, Westlake, LASA in Texas, I'm just talking to my Texas people here, then they want to take that AP course. It's a good class for students who want to venture into computer science in college because it gives them an idea. But as far as it being one of the courses that you're just introducing AP, I think it's very unfair for students. But yeah, so it's an either or. But now we have AP Principal, which is for every student, which is really good. I think it's a good class. It exposes them to every bit of data, AI, cyber, and the uses of computer science. So I think they are okay, but I don't like the fact that at the end there's that push for that exam.
So Reiner, you teach AP as well.
I do, yeah. I'm not the main person. I've only been doing it for the last 2-3 years now. I guess been teaching one section of AP a year. And so I teach the intro class, which uses Python. So my big hope and wish would be that they would just switch AP over to Python as well. I think it's a more accessible language just in general. So I think there's a lot of complexity that comes in just because Java is Java. And so, but yeah, it's a decent class. It is limited in what you can do. My intro class, I love it because, we can go all over the place, do a little Arduino, do a little this, a little that, Google, JavaScript, right, Python, and in AP, you're just locked into what the curriculum is and the testing they're going to do at the end. But that's just the nature of AP classes in general.
And maybe just a follow up to that. So the issue that I seem to have with AP computer science is that a lot of times they test out the edge cases. What I would call the edge cases. It's like, well, let's take a look at writing our code so that we've got, we're going to create an array with 0 elements. Is that valid? It's like, well, no one would ever do that. Is my answer to that. It's just like, and that's a question that we just reviewed today. So yes, it is legitimate to create an array of 0 elements, but in the real world, no one would do that.
Yeah, I agree that they do try to be tricky. And I mean, that's just it's easy to write tricky questions like that. And it's harder to write a little more conceptual questions on testing that, right? It gets even worse here in Texas. We have programming competitions, and part of that is a 45-minute, I call it Java trivia minutia test that everybody takes. And so, yeah, it's ridiculous some of the things that they expect students to know for that. And yeah, like you said, not very useful, right? You would never do some of that stuff.
So I have a question from Van, and it's a different question, and I'm totally for CS teachers, and so I don't know if how much I want to help. But the question is, they're a teacher of math now. They're teaching computer science next year, but they're looking to make the switch to the opposite direction. Like if you're teaching now and you want to go into tech, then is there advice or things that you would tell her?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many courses now out there that you can take. You don't necessarily need to go to a computer science program at a university, you can take classes from Coursera, Udemy, maybe put your foot in a company and then have them sponsor some of your courses. So you can do that, but that's not what we are here for. We want teachers. We want them to
We
stay.
do, but we
We want the
want to
kids to
talk you out
stay.
of it.
No, but it's okay. You know what? Like we said, we went to those careers, we worked quite a bit and we were stable. So it's not fair to tell somebody else that you need to stay while we did it. So there are ways you can do it, but you have to be comfortable. Depending with what companies you're going for, you will have some programming tests that you have to go through. So learn as much as you can about the company and what kind of tests they would give you to test you whether you're a suitable person for their company. So yeah, just get prepared. But it can be done. We are training kids out of high school and getting jobs. You as a teacher, you can do the same thing.
Right, exactly. Are there any other questions from any other questions you want to ask the panel?
If people don't have questions, I would say that if you're out there and you have been voluntold to teach, and you want a program that has somebody who has been in the industry and somebody who has been a teacher and also a professional development teacher, it's me. I'm developing a Master's of Computer Science Education at our university. It's a flat $12,000 for the whole program, cheaper than most universities one semester, and you get a whole master's, no application fee, no GRE, and not any other fee. So I'll put that in the chat for anybody who would like a program that can help them.
And is that an online program or
Yeah, it's an 100% online as of last semester. Yeah,
Wow.
because we don't have, and anybody, even if you're from international or from another state, it's still the same cost.
And does it prepare for state certification?
Yeah, we do the practice. We prepare them for the practice, which is, if you can do practice, they will accept it in Texas, and in Texas you have the Texas exam. So you can, it's the same exam, because at first I used the UT material that we used out there.
So that Jill might want to write this down when you put it in the chat window.
I'm putting it in the chat, yeah, so she can have it there.
Because it is a trick to figure out how to get certified, and sometimes it works best to do it the fastest way, and sometimes it works better to do it where you get more, you take it a little slower and you learn more about the pedagogy and the teaching practice itself. And so it sounds like a really great approach.
Yeah, there are just a few programs in the country now who have produced those 75 teachers. We are hoping to produce a few more, you know, as you told us, Cara, at the beginning, yeah.
Right,
So.
and I've worked with UT about this, and to have an online version is such an awesome opportunity, because sometimes there just aren't enough people in one university to make the numbers for these courses. And so it really does seem like we've got to start online so that we can build up, you know, enough people in one place to have the courses make sense. So I'm not super in love with online for everything, especially learning how to teach it's hard to do online. But at this point, it really makes a lot of sense to pull people from a lot of different locations, and so that you have, you know, you can build a program.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So Melissa, do we, is it time to wrap up?
Yes, it is. We've come to the end of our hour together.
Well, I want to thank our panelists. Y'all were so awesome. And thank you, Clark, for joining in, and Fan and Jill. I really enjoyed this hour, and I thank y'all very much for being here.
Thank you for organizing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have upcoming activities that maybe you might have wanted to share.
Yes, I believe next slide. So we do have 2 webinars coming up. One is Code You Can Touch, Projects and Tools for Creating Augmented and Virtual Reality Experiences. And that is scheduled for Thursday, May 13th. And then one on Tuesday, May 25th, that is focused on microbits in the classroom and strategies to use both virtually and in person. I'm going to share with you, I'm grabbing the link right now. You can sign up for these webinars on our events page on CS for All Teachers. And so if you just click on those, if you click on those links within the calendar pages, it will take you to the registration site for each of those. But we thank you for being here. We did have a small but mighty group. That's been great. I think the conversation was amazing. So I'm not always sold on like quantity. Let's have good quality conversation. But since we do have some folks who may want to stay connected, if you'd like to share emails or social media addresses or things in the chat, I think that would be great to share with others if they want to continue the conversations. But with that, I'll just say thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.